Jasmine Carter was 19 years old, standing at the Family Feud podium in a yellow dress she had bought the week before because she'd wanted something that felt like an occasion. When Steve Harvey asked her the question he asks everyone as part of the pre-game warm-up, "What do you do, Jasmine? What's a day in your life look like?" He expected the answer most 19-year-olds give: school, work, friends, something about social media. Jasmine Carter tilted her head slightly, the specific tilt of someone deciding whether to tell the whole truth, and then she said, "I get up at 5:30 and I make breakfast for 4 boys. I get them dressed and I make sure their backpacks are packed, and I walk the 2 youngest to the elementary school and the 2 oldest take the bus. Then I go to my community college classes. Then I come home and make dinner and help with homework and get them into bed. And then I study." Steve Harvey had stopped mid-question, had literally been forming the next word, and now stood completely still. He looked at Jasmine. "How old are the boys?" She said 8, 9, 11, and 13. He said, "And how long have you been doing this?" She said, 7 years. "Since I was 12. The studio did not make a single sound for 6 full seconds. Then Steve Harvey put his cards down and said, to no one in particular, in a voice that had nothing left of the television host in it, "Lord." It was a Saturday in April 2023, and Jasmine Carter had come to Atlanta from Birmingham, Alabama, with her 4 brothers: Malik, 13, Jerome, 11, Darius, 9, and little Corey, 8, plus her Aunt Sandra, who had agreed to come as the 5th team member and who had cried twice in the green room already before the show started. Jasmine had told her to stop crying. Sandra had said she couldn't help it. The boys were in matching navy shirts that Jasmine had ordered, washed, ironed, and laid out the night before. She had laid them out in order: Malik's on the chair, Jerome's on the dresser, Darius's on the bed. Corey's folded small on the nightstand because Corey had a way of losing shirts between the drawer and his body if they weren't placed somewhere specific. She knew exactly how all 4 of them functioned in the morning. She had been calibrating it since she was 12. Jasmine had been 12 years old when her mother Linda left. Not died. Left. Left in the way that some parents leave, suddenly, with a bag, with a reason that was given, and then revised, and then stopped being given, and did not come back. Her father had not been in the picture since Jasmine was 6. The boy's father, Linda's second relationship, had been gone since Corey was 2. Jasmine was the oldest. Jasmine had been 12. Their Aunt Sandra lived 40 minutes away and worked double shifts at a distribution center. She had come every weekend she could. She had brought groceries when she could bring groceries. She had filed the paperwork that allowed Jasmine to be listed as the emergency contact for all 4 boys at their schools. She had cried about it privately, in her car, on the way home from Jasmine's apartment, every single weekend for 7 years. What Sandra had not been able to do was be there every day. Every day had been Jasmine. The specifics of what 7 years of every day looked like were not things Jasmine had ever put into a list, because she was not a person who made lists of things she could not change. She had simply done the next thing, and the next thing after that, in the way that children who become parents earlier than the world intended them to become parents learn to do. With focus, with routine, with a complete absence of self-pity, and with a particular form of love that has been tested in ways that most adults will never have to test theirs. She had maintained a 3.7 GPA in high school while doing all of it. She had been accepted to 2 four-year universities and had chosen instead to attend community college in Birmingham so she would not have to move the boys. She was studying early childhood education. She had never told a single professor why she was particularly good at understanding children. Her youngest brother Corey had once told their teacher during a first-grade show and tell that his mother's name was Jasmine and that she was the best mother in the world. The teacher had called Sandra to discuss it. Sandra had explained the situation. The teacher had gone to the principal's office and closed the door. 40 minutes later, she had returned with a resource list and a box of tissues she had used both privately. But nobody in that studio knew what was underneath the yellow dress and the pre-game warm-up answer. When Jasmine said it, said all of it, calmly, in sequence, as though she were describing a perfectly ordinary day, which to her it was. The studio had gone quiet in the 6-second silence that Steve later described as the most completely silent he had ever heard that room. And then he said, "Lord." He said it quietly, looking somewhere past the cameras, the way a person says something when they have been struck by something so large that the language available for it is not quite large enough. He walked to Jasmine. He stood in front of her. He looked at her for a moment before he spoke. "Jasmine," he said, "you were 12. "Yes," she said. "And your youngest brother, Corey, he was what, 1? 2? "He was 1, she said. "He turned 2 about 4 months after." Steve Harvey walked a few paces and stood with his back to the audience. He was not performing. He was collecting himself. When he turned back, his eyes were wet, and he was not trying to hide it. "I want to talk to everyone watching at home," he said. He looked directly into the camera. "I need you to see this young woman. She is 19 years old. She has been a mother since she was 12. She has not slept past 5:30 a.m. in 7 years. She has packed backpacks and made breakfasts and walked children to school and done homework and studied for her own classes and maintained a 3.7 GPA, and she is standing in this studio today in a yellow dress because she wanted something that felt like an occasion. This is an occasion. This young woman, standing right here, is one of the most extraordinary human beings I have ever met on this stage." He turned to Jasmine. "What do you want?" he said. "Not for the boys. For yourself. What do you want?" Jasmine Carter looked at Steve Harvey with the expression of someone who has not been asked that question in a very long time, possibly ever, and who is now locating the answer from somewhere she doesn't visit often. "I want to finish school," she said. I want to be a teacher, elementary school. I want to be the teacher that the kids who need someone the most know they can come to." She paused. "And I want the boys to go to college. All 4 of them. I want that more than anything." "Have you been able to save anything for their college?" Steve asked. Jasmine's expression answered before she did. "No," she said quietly. "There's not. There isn't anything left after what we need." The studio was completely silent. But Steve wasn't done, he said to himself, quietly, audible on the microphone, almost as though he'd forgotten the camera was on. Then he looked at the room and said it to everyone. "I'm not done." He pulled out his phone. He called his foundation's education director, live on stage, and committed, for all 4 brothers, to full 4-year university scholarship packages, beginning with Malik's senior year of high school 1 year away, and continuing through Corey's graduation in 9 years. He said each boy's name. He said each boy's age. He made the commitment for each one individually, so that every child in that room and every person watching understood. These 4 boys were going to college. All 4 of them. Jasmine's promise to herself, made on behalf of her brothers, was now real. He also committed to a 2-year transfer scholarship for Jasmine herself to the university of her choice, once the youngest was old enough for the transition, so she could complete her 4-year degree in elementary education. He said it last and he said it clearly. Jasmine gets to finish her dream too. The studio fell apart. Malik, 13 years old, the oldest of the 4 boys, who had been standing at the side of the stage with the composed expression of a teenager who has learned early to manage his emotions in public, walked onto the stage without permission, which Steve saw and allowed. He walked to his sister. He stood next to her. He said nothing. He just stood next to her, which was the right thing, which was the 13-year-old version of the only thing that mattered. Steve looked at the boys, all 4 of them, in their matching navy shirts. Corey, who was 8, waved at him. Steve laughed, a real one, the helpless kind, and waved back. "You 4 boys," Steve said to them, "do you know what your sister has done for you?" Darius, who was 9 and extremely literal, said, "She makes our breakfasts." The studio laughed and cried simultaneously. "She makes your breakfasts," Steve said. "Yes, she does. She has been making your breakfasts for 7 years. And one day, when you are grown men with families of your own, you are going to understand everything that means, and you're going to call her. Every day. You hear me?" The boys nodded. Corey said, "I'll call her twice." The competing family, the Williamson family from Memphis, had not moved from their side during any of this. Their captain, a woman named Donna, was wiping her face with a tissue and had been for several minutes. She crossed the stage and looked at Jasmine and said, "Baby, you did good." That was all. That was exactly right. Steve announced both families were receiving the full prize package. He said it almost as an aside, because the room already knew everything that mattered. The episode aired 8 weeks later. The clip of Steve Harvey saying "Lord" and then looking at Jasmine was viewed 265 million times in 12 days. The hashtag #SheWas12 trended in 21 countries. Child welfare advocates, youth mentorship organizations, and educational equity groups shared the clip widely. Several state legislatures cited the episode in discussions about kinship care support funding. 3 months after that Saturday, the state of Alabama's Department of Human Resources contacted Jasmine Carter's family, prompted through a complicated sequence of advocacy that had begun with the episode, to offer formal kinship care recognition and a retroactive monthly support payment that had not been available to Jasmine previously because no one had navigated the application on her behalf. Sandra had navigated it, finally, with the help of a social worker who had watched the episode. A year after the taping, Malik Carter was a senior in high school with a 3.8 GPA and a confirmed scholarship for the following fall. Jerome was active in his school's debate team. Darius had won his school's science fair with a project on plant growth. Corey had joined the school choir and had, according to his teacher, an unexpectedly powerful voice. Jasmine was in her 3rd year at community college. She was on track to transfer the following year. She had been accepted as a peer mentor for incoming first-generation students. She told her mentees the same thing in the first session every year. The goal is to get to the finish line. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter what the path looks like. Get to the finish line. Steve Harvey, in a later interview, said, "I stopped mid-question because the question I'd asked didn't matter anymore. What does your day look like?" She answered it. She answered it completely. And the answer was 23 words that told me everything about who that young woman is. She said, "I get up at 5:30 and I make breakfast for 4 boys." 23 words. That's the whole story. He paused. She was 12. She is the most prepared teacher those children will ever have. Some people are handed more than any person should carry, and they carry it anyway, not because they are extraordinary, but because the children behind them need someone to walk in front. Jasmine Carter has been walking in front since she was 12 years old. She packed the backpacks. She walked them to school. She studied when they slept. She bought herself a yellow dress because she wanted something that felt like an occasion. It was. If this story about Jasmine and her 4 brothers moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that the most extraordinary love in the world is often invisible, done at 5:30 a.m. before anyone is watching. Because someone needs breakfast. Have you ever known someone who gave everything for the people who needed them? Share their story in the comments. And ring that notification bell. Because as Jasmine Carter proved, sometimes the most heroic thing a person can do is simply show up every morning and make breakfast.